Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Political Pulse. It's really great to be here on the first day of Bulldog Days. It is a wonderful, wonderful April 16th, 2012. Tomorrow is my 21st birthday, but that is neither here nor there. Most important, ladies and gentlemen, is that I'm joined by two guests. Michael Knowles, president of the Yale College Republicans. Michael, thanks for joining me here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Not at all, not at all. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest. He just stumbled into the studios here. President George W. Bush.
Thank you. God bless you. It's so wonderful to be here tonight.
Well, Mr. President, I'm going to honor you here with a bit of a tune that you might recognize. You ready for it?
Too nice. Thank you. Happy birthday.
It's really great to have you here, Mr. President. And how's it feel, Michael? We'll be sitting next to...
It's such an honor. I think it was a really smart move to get two guys on the show during Bulldog Days who so accurately represent Yale's political environment.
I could not agree more. And our nation's environment.
No, but Michael, I remember talking to you a bit before the show, and you told me that, what was it that the College Republicans
we're the loudest and most recognized two-person
exactly.
club on
That's
campus.
exactly how you said it. That's exactly how you said it. So, Michael, I'm curious, and Mr. President, we'll get to you shortly, but you're a boy from New York.
I am.
You are from where exactly?
Originally Brooklyn, and then I grew up in Westchester, and I'm an actor from New York. So
yeah. How are you in the Republicans? Why are you a conservative?
I'm such a contrarian. I'm not sure. I grew up in a political environment that was pretty moderate. My mother apparently worked on Reagan 84 and then worked for Democrats after that. My father is pretty wishy-washy, sort of moderate type, likes Obamacare. We talk about it all the time. But I suppose I became a Republican because I was convinced that they are correct. I was convinced that they were the only people who were...
That's right.
The guy sitting next to me convinced me a little bit too. I was convinced they're the only people, they're the only adults in the room, the only people who are dealing seriously with these generational issues that affect our generation, which is the economy and our national debt.
All right. Mr. President, do you have anything to add to that?
My father's kind of wishy-washy, too. I mean, that man raised taxes, and he lost. But I do respect him.
And this is a traditional question that we have here on the show. Something I ask all our guests. Who is your favorite president? And I should have gone to it sooner. But Michael here, and Mr. President, too. Who are your favorite presidents?
The answer is so clear. I'm an actor and active in Republican politics, so it's got to be...
It's got to be Ronald Reagan.
It's got to be the Gipper,
The Gipper,
of course,
the
yeah.
Gipper. You a fan of jelly beans?
I love jelly beans. Easter's my favorite time of year.
I'm right here, Michael. If you'd like to know my favorite president, well, I'll give you a hint. It sounds a lot like George Bush Sr., but without the senior part.
You think you did that good job in office?
Yeah.
Those were 8 spectacularly successful years, weren't they?
Every year was better than the last. My 9th year was even better.
Well, I'm glad someone thinks so. But Michael, so your favorite president, Ronald Reagan. Now let me ask you this, because I'm still trying to wrap my head over Mr. Reagan here. Because on the one hand, there's the presidency, there's actually his record. And on the other hand, there's his legacy, what people perceive to be his record.
And there's the film career, too. You're forgetting about that part.
Oh, well, I mean, he's a good-looking guy. He was he was an actor. Was he in Jaws?
Yeah, man. No, maybe not.
I didn't know about that. I'll have to look that up.
I don't think so, my friend. But what do you make of that? The fact that he's a president, for example, who cut taxes, for sure. The highest bracket went from something like 80% to below 30%, but he also raised taxes 12 times. And so what people think of Reagan today is not actually who Reagan was.
Sure. I think there's sort of a ridiculous line that's trying to be put forth by maybe David Axelrod and other Democratic strategists, which is that if Reagan were alive today, he would be a Democrat. I've never heard any argument for that.
I don't think that's true at all.
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous. There's this idea that President Obama cannot run on his record. The three public policy polling shows us that the three most important issues to voters today are the economy, the national debt, and the health care law, all of which are big losers for President Obama's record. So what do they run on? They run on the record of a very popular president, Ronald Reagan. The trouble is...
He wasn't actually very popular while he was in office, though.
Oh, sure, but today you'd call him one of the most popular presidents in recent memory.
Yeah, Gallup always scores him in the top.
Kind of like me.
Kind of like this guy, someday.
Are you hoping 20 years down the road to pull a Reagan out of your own legacy? To make a Reagan out of your own legacy?
I think I'm already there. I mean, Frank, I think Reagan is alive today. He's sitting right here.
Mr. President, you can probably take solace in the idea that President Truman's approval rating was 12% when he left office, and history has been fairly kind to him. So hopefully
No, I'm
it'll
a
be
big
kind
fan
to
of
you
Harry
too.
S. Truman. Really, I mean, think about it, like Marshall Plan, right? The guy to first enact, policies for containment and etc.
Sure.
Korea probably wasn't. Well, Korea is also a bit controversial, I would say, because on the one hand, well, what would you make of Korea, Michael?
Of Korea, I haven't given it much thought, to
Yeah,
be
it's not
fair.
something that
But
ponders in.
if I want Cold War history, I'll have to read Professor Gaddis's
Yeah, that's
Pulitzer
true. You were
Prize-winning
just
book.
telling me before we came on the show that he won a Pulitzer for that, didn't he?
I was brushing up on my talking points on my Google Reader, and I just saw this breaking news, so congratulations to Professor Gaddis.
Professor Gaddis, congratulations.
I hear one's coming out for Decision Points, my book. Pulitzer. You'll be hearing about that soon.
Well, I look forward to talking about that with you.
I'll be back on the show, I'm sure.
I look forward to that, Mr. President. So about Harry S. Truman, all right, I'm a big fan, and I only hope that you can see a raise in your own fortunes there, Mr. President. But one thing I want to talk to you both about today, and this is something I've actually noticed hasn't made many headlines. Would you agree? The recent budget proposal of Paul Ryan, or maybe it just happens that the media outlets that I'm listening to and I'm reading to are making a big fuss out of it.
Sure,
but,
I agree with you. I think part of the reason is it's not a new budget proposal. Paul Ryan has put out
we're fans of Paul Ryan, are we not?
I love Paul Ryan.
All right.
Paul Ryan and Mitch Daniels, two of my favorite guys in the country.
And what was, before we talked about Paul Ryan, what was your deal with Mitch Daniels? You were trying to make him run, weren't you?
Oh, I spent so much of my life trying to get that guy to run for president.
In what capacity exactly? Twitter, emails? I mean, no, you were...
No, we ran a national campaign called the Student Initiative to Draft Daniels. It spread to 68 chapters across the country. We flew out to Indiana to meet with him. We went to D.C. to meet with him. We aired TV commercials. And ultimately, we got this call that said, hey, guys, my family comes first. I love my country. I love my family more. And then we cried for half a day. And then I got a call from...
Why don't you like your country more? That's what I have to say.
You should have called him, Mr. President.
Maybe
I wish
I
you
will.
had taken your call.
It's not too late.
I have a feeling it might just be too late. But so then you try to get Mitch Daniels to run.
Yeah.
Unsuccessful. You cried for a day.
Right.
And then someone called you. Didn't they give you a call? Who exactly gave you a call?
Sure, I got a call from the chief strategist for John Huntsman, a man named John Weaver, who I think was very unfairly treated in the press. He was a really nice guy.
John Huntsman?
Both of them are. Huntsman and John Weaver, who was the strategist behind Governor Huntsman. And he said that we're going to pick up where Mitch Daniels left off. So they flew me and the other guy who started Students for Daniels up to New Hampshire, and we met with the governor, and he was just fantastic on taxes and on the national debt.
Governor of Utah.
Governor of Utah.
Cut taxes, right? Increased revenue as well, didn't he?
Yes, very, very successful governor of Utah. I thought he was, at the time, the most viable candidate in the Republican primary race. I was apparently incorrect.
Unfortunately, no one else believed.
Apparently, yeah. He spoke like a statesman, which Mitch Daniels did as well, and that really, I think, reverberated well among young Republicans and young independents. And at the end of the day, the Daniels would-be campaign and the Huntsman campaign did have the most support among the young Republican community. So at least I feel like we did our job.
But then what went wrong?
Well, they should have taken us out there more. We stumped with Governor Huntsman in about 2 towns in New Hampshire, and he did tie for first in those towns. There were about 6 voters, so we can't take too much credit.
And so who are you supporting? I don't want to talk too much about it because it's a topic that's been exhaustively done on many other.
Of course, I think Newt's probably resurging. So no, I'm kidding. Governor Romney's got the nomination.
Good joke.
I think Romney's got the nomination. I assume somebody like Marco Rubio will get the VP nod. Although, if Governor Romney is listening to the Political Pulse, which I assume he is, Governor Romney and Mrs. Goodman, I hope that Governor Romney...
And Harry Graver. And, actually, a good friend of mine who just posted on Facebook, David Galper. Thanks for being such a loyal fan. Continue, Michael.
Well,
Mr. President.
Hi, David.
I would encourage Governor Romney to look at, say, Mitch Daniels or Representative
Why
Ryan.
do we like Mitch Daniels? I mean, you sold me on Huntsman. Sell me quickly on Mitch Daniels.
I'll sell you even quicker on Daniels. Governor Daniels was the most succcessful governor in America.
Wow, that's quite a statement.
It's a big statement. He turned a $600 million deficit into over $1 billion surplus. Indiana was in a really bad state when he came in, and he turned everything around. He did it by attracting Republicans, independents, even some Democrats, because he understands, and he gave a great speech at CPAC that we were at, that said that right now America is facing a new red menace, this time consisting of ink. and it threatens the survival of our very republic. I think that's the issue that speaks the most to our generation.
And that's the issue that we're going to get to when we talk about Paul Ryan in a minute. But
absolutely.
When you mentioned Mitch Daniel, and he began off as governor of a state that was running deficits, and then ended off as of a state that ran a surplus. My only concern is that how did he do that? He did it by privatizing things, correct? Monetarizing
in part,
things,
sure.
Right, and I remember talking to you a bit about this before the show. He privatized things, and when you privatize something, when you monetize something like that, I don't remember exactly what it was. What was it exactly?
He did some work on highways,
right?
Toll roads, and these sort of
things.
Right,
he gave like toll roads away, for example. So that's
he didn't give them. I think he got a pretty good price for it.
Right, for sure. But the fact is, though, that you're selling it now for an immediate gain, but you're kind of foregoing gains in the future. In 10 years from now. So my only concern with what you just said about Mitch Daniel is that, yes, he had a surplus, but that's only because the state will be foregoing revenues 10 years down the line.
Sure. I haven't looked too deeply into the toll road politics of Indiana, despite my affinity for the governor. But
what about you, Mr. President? Are you familiar with it?
I love toll roads.
What I will say, though, is
trolls.
is that Governor Daniels understood the immediacy and the urgency of this situation that we're in. The national debt has now eclipsed the entire size of our economy, our entire GDP.
We're not as bad as Japan, though.
Not yet.
That's hardly a good motto either.
Our corporate tax rate has just actually surpassed Japan, and now we are the highest corporate tax rate in the world.
And this is one of the things that Paul Ryan, with his recent budget plan, actually wants to change.
Yes.
Lowering the corporate tax rate, which I also believe Obama is a big fan of. And I do want to get to talking about Paul Ryan, and I know you're a big fan.
Love Paul Ryan.
Paul Ryan. The truth is, I like him a lot, too. He's kind of geeky, and I like the geekiness. I think that we need more geeks in Congress. Wouldn't you agree?
He's great. In a world of slick politicians, Paul Ryan is this earnest, serious guy who sticks to his message, sticks to the issue at hand, which is the economy and our national debt, and does it very effectively, and hopefully more effectively when we have a Republican Senate.
And we're going to hear from him right now, shall we, guys? You excited, Mr. President?
I'm excited.
And that is, what about the national debt? We know in front of us is one of the most predictable crises we've ever had in this country's history. A mountain of debt that is coming. This is what the Congressional Budget Office is telling us our future is going to look like. This is the future that the President's plan of debt and decline brings us to. This is what the Senate gets you by doing nothing, by not passing a budget for 3 years in a row. This is a future that gives our children a diminished country.
So those were a few words from the congressman from Wisconsin. So he introduced this bill, a path to prosperity, as he called it. And it passed the House, I believe. It passed the House, not winning many Democrats over, but it kind of fizzled out in the Senate, as many things do, right?
Well, I think it won over as many, if not more, Democrats as did President Obama's very cynical and unserious budget. The difference here between Representative Ryan and President Obama is that one of them is putting forth serious solutions to real problems.
So what are those specifics of the serious solution here?
Well, the serious
Let's
solution...
talk about them. One thing that he does is...
I'd say the most important aspect of Paul Ryan's budget is entitlement reform. And in many ways, Paul Ryan's budget does not go far enough. But, to make... As President Obama has tried to do, to make this issue of our deficit into something like the Buffett tax or the Buffett rule or whatever he's talking about now, which addresses 0.4% of our annual budget deficit, is preposterous when entitlements make up half of our entire budget.
Yeah, but who doesn't like a good buffet? You know what I'm saying? I like the buffet rule, especially if there's chicken.
Mr. President, I always appreciate your insight here.
Thank you.
But so you mentioned entitlement reform, and one of my main concerns, I'm on the progressive. I'm a Democrat here. I'm on
for
the
now. We haven't talked long enough.
So maybe by the end of the show, who knows? Maybe you'll have this room will be just Republican. The 3 Republicans in the room instead of just 2. But one of my concerns is that this bill does a few things. Number one, it simplifies the tax code. So instead of 6 rates, it brings it down to 2. It lowers the tax on the highest individuals from 35% to 25%, which actually might even increase revenue, which is good, which a lot of Republicans don't even like. It also gets rid of a lot of deductions, loopholes. I like that a lot. And he does plan on cutting the deficit within the next decade by around $5 trillion. That's good. I like to hear that. But where is this really coming from, cutting the deficit? It comes from Well, it comes by slashing entitlements. Now, for example, for sure we need
Does it come from slashing entitlements, or does it come from saving entitlements? Because the president has said, and
like
David
that.
Axelrod...
Very clever what you did there with the semantics.
Thank you. And what David Axelrod have said is that Paul Ryan's plan will end Medicare as we know it. Well, do you know what else ends Medicare as we know it? Medicare as we know it. That's what does. So I find the statements from the president to be very cynical in that regard.
Yeah, I completely agree with Paul Ryan that we need to raise entitlement spending in this country. I mean, otherwise, how will we maintain our sense of entitlement in this country?
Mr. President, I think that explains Medicare Part D. Your understanding of the situation.
And did you, Mr. President, actually pass one of the largest entitlement? Is that what you're getting at?
Yes.
In 2004. Well, I think that's what Michael was getting at. In 2004, before you attempted to privatize Medicare, you actually passed the Prescription Drug Act, which basically expanded it by hundreds of billions of dollars. So while you were also getting us all into trouble in Iraq and Afghanistan, you're getting nervous here, aren't you, Mr. President? You were also...
Not at all. I'm not sweating.
You were also passing these huge entitlements while cutting our taxes. So I'm not sure how that legacy is looking out for you right now. But the fact is that what he wants to do with entitlements, Michael, is he wants to... And explain this to the viewers out there who are perhaps not as familiar with the details,
including me.
Including you.
I'll do my best.
He wants to convert Medicare to a premium support system. What exactly is that? Vouchers? What are these?
Premium support is the only way to shore up Medicare in the near future. I think the president has obscured the real issue in terms of the healthcare law. What we need to do is decrease healthcare costs for every American. That's how we get more Americans to have medical insurance. So how do you decrease costs? Well, you can follow the president's plan of obscuring costs every step of the way. When we look at Medicare, nobody has any idea what they're spending. The patient has no idea what they're spending. The doctors really have no idea what they're spending. Every incentive is to take more tests and spend more money, because when the consumer doesn't know what they're spending,
right,
they'll spend as much as they can.
And also, Americans are the type of people that will go through all these examinations to make sure that everything's okay with them.
Oh, of course. So what we have currently is a defined benefits plan. What we're moving to in this premium support is a defined contribution plan, which has been derided as ending Medicare as we know it, or vouchers, or whatever.
And so this will basically, the federal government will therefore give people of the age of 65 X amount of dollars so that they can go about purchasing care on their own accords, right?
The federal government will give consumers more knowledge about what they're spending and more control over their own health care. I don't think any American, any rational American would disagree and say that this was a bad thing for our healthcare industry and for the American people, more economic liberty. So what the president has done, and what Democrats have done since the days of Tip O'Neill, is demagogue Medicare and say that Republicans are throwing grandma out in the snow or something like that. I don't think it's working anymore.
Yeah, and it's cold out here.
I don't think that's working anymore. I think the 2010 election showed us that. Also, the only major piece of legislation that cut Medicare, that cut money from Medicare, was President Obama's own Affordable Care Act, and that probably explains some of the public opposition to it.
But I just feel that, this voucher system, it will create a system whereby the wealthy and those that can, and the healthy, the wealthy and
the
healthy,
1%.
They will opt out of the system, right? They will go to the private insurance, and what that will do is that that will increase costs for the sickly and the less wealthy, and so those costs will rise.
Sure, the idea of giving people more control over their health care will not result in this sort of disastrous scenario that you posted. So? No, because we're not just going out Wild West and everyone's on their own.
There's nothing wrong with the Wild West. I just want to put that out there. I love Texas.
Thank you. And I'm wearing a Texas Longhorn shirt.
I love you, baby. Texas Longhorns. Woo.
This is the Armageddon scenario that the Democrats would like to portray. That's not the case. We are trying to save Medicare as we know it. We're trying to save these basic entitlement programs so that people can age with dignity and that everyone will be cared for. But unfortunately, we cannot afford the health reform that President Obama put forth. And it also looks like it was not constitutional, and we'll hear from the Supreme Court on that soon. We're going to hear from that,
yeah. One thing I would like to add to this whole debate and talk of healthcare reform, I was reading this great article and it talked about how in Oregon and Washington, those states far, far out west, okay, farther west than the Wild West, it was talking about how these states have imposed and enacted Death with Dignity Acts. Are you familiar with these?
I'm not. Please enlighten me.
Yeah, I will, for sure. It's my pleasure. You come on the show to be enlightened. And so
I came on to meet the president, actually.
I came on to meet Michael Knowles, and it is a pleasure.
And so these Death with Dignity acts, which have, I will also mention, huge approval ratings, something like 75% of people approve of them, in which basically they make sure that doctors and patients have conversations with each other, and what it ends up doing is, these 85, 95, or 95-year-olds who, instead of having that final operation on their hip, for example, they have this kind of conversation, and basically they give their doctor permission to kind of, not to be crass, or to pull the plug in, etc. And what it's shown that in Washington and Oregon, that it's just drastically decreased costs. And so this is the whole federalism system that we have in place in this country. When you kind of look at states and see, and just like we did, with Robert Lafayette in Wisconsin, when it came to Wisconsin, again, helping us out in the 1990s when it came to welfare reform, looking at states, seeing what works well, and it seems to be working well, in Washington and Oregon with this Death with Dignity Act. No, I thought it was interesting what I was reading earlier this morning.
Have you ever been to Oregon? I mean, it's a bunch of liberals.
It's a great point, actually. Although I do love Portlandia. It's one of my favorite new shows.
Yeah.
I think,
show.
what you're talking about is really beginning a discussion on euthanasia, which is another one of these social issues.
But what about old people in Asia? Come on.
Yeah, you're right. I hadn't thought about that.
They need to die with dignity, too.
Mr. President, you should have gotten into comedy, not politics. Michael, you were saying?
Sure. This conversation about euthanasia is another social issue that is...
I'm not sure if it's euthanasia exactly. I'm going to have to pull this up. One of my interns is going to have to come in with a bit more information.
There's a distinction, sure. I look forward to seeing your intern. There's a distinction between what
so
you're
does
talking
Bill
about.
Clinton.
One thing that is important, though, without opening up these sort of culture war issues, such as euthanasia or stem cell research or abortion, blah, 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 it shows that, and these are all important issues, I do not mean to diminish them, but I think it sort of misjudges the tenor of the American political scene right now. The president would love this election to be about, the so-called war on women, the social issues, contraception, or whatever he's talking about this week, because he needs to distract from a failed record on the economy and the national debt. I don't think the American people are going to go for that, particularly among the young generation. President Obama won in 2008 because you and I, well, not me, but maybe you, went out and fundraised and voted for him in record, unheard-of numbers. Youth unemployment is the highest it's been in 60 years. Our national debt is over $15 trillion. There is no way that he's going to recapture that support, and I think it would be very irrational for a young person in America to vote for the president again in 2012.
Thank God I had nothing to do with that national debt rising.
Well, compared to President Obama ran on the promise that he would get rid of all these Bush budget deficits. And what happened? He presided over the 3 largest deficits in American history.
Bush or Obama?
President Obama.
President Obama? I mean, the deficit definitely has skyrocketed over the past 4 years.
3 largest in American history. That's a big number.
Yeah, but also he came in during a recession, during a crisis. So it's not like he came in like Bush over here.
And what did President Obama promise? President Obama promised that if we passed his $8 trillion, $800 billion stimulus.
That's a big word.
That's a big word. It's a President Bush kind of word. If we passed that stimulus, unemployment would remain below 7%. That was the White House's own promise. What happened? It shot up to 10%.
Yeah, but the economy is never something simple that you pull a few levers and you get results.
But it is the rule of politics, and I think President Obama at least used to be pretty good at politics. Is the rule of politics to overpromise and underdeliver? I don't think so. It was devastating to his cause when that occurred. He promised that 2010 would be recovery summer, and I suppose it was, if you see what happened in the landslide House Republican elections.
I just think it's unfair, though, to say that, while it's true, but it's it's taking things out of context. It's like starting off a documentary of World War II with an image of the atom mushroom over Hiroshima.
Perhaps.
And then what you do is you
I don't
sympathize
think
so
so
much with the Japanese and not understanding that there's a war involved here. And it's the same thing with Obama. Yes, there are these 3 deficits, but he also came in to the worst financial and economic crisis in 60 years.
You're right. And what did he focus on for his first year?
Okay,
he focused on creating a perhaps unconstitutional health care law that has never once had the support of more than a third of the
And I don't agree with
public.
that. But he also didn't come along with us kind of austerity measures that you now see the Cameron government coming out with. And the British government has inflicted a double-dip recession on its people. Britain is currently in a recession. It is contracted. Its economy is smaller today than it was last year because of austerity measures. So yes, on the one hand, we have deficits, and these are short-term deficits, which he really hasn't done much to address in the medium-long term, like I would say Paul Ryan should deserve some credit for. But to blame him on these three largest deficits...
Well, his promise was, and this is in 2007 when the economic crisis had begun to hit, his promise was that he would get rid of these Bush deficits. And, there was he also ran on foreign policy, and I'm not going to judge the president's foreign policy just yet.
We don't have much time for that.
We don't have enough time. But what, particularly when President Obama's actions in Libya were going on, we all heard that, if you voted for John McCain, we were going to start a war with a third Muslim country. And those people were absolutely correct. I voted for John McCain, and then we started a war with a third Muslim country. So followed up on that promise.
One thing I do want to talk about with you, just because I find this really interesting, and you see this in all the newspapers, in Wall Street Journal, coming out every day, and I subscribe to the Journal. And this is something I know that when we talked a bit before the show that you were very passionate about, and it's a total shift of gears. And I do apologize. We talked about healthcare and all that, and Obama's record.
We are going to solve the problems of the world today.
That's what we're going to do. Is that the problem?
I already have. Just no one realizes it yet.
But and you come from New York, and I come from New York, and one of the things that we see.
And I come from Texas.
Right?
Okay.
Connecticut, I thought originally. Now,
well, whatever.
It's been a long time.
It's been a long time. Well, and so this is a total shift of gears, but something that is really fascinates me and fascinates you as well, Michael. And this is natural gas. So I want to quickly talk about natural gas for a second, and I do apologize for such a shifting gears. But
I love it. I'll jump with you anywhere you go, Joseph.
Exactly. You'll jump, But it's one thing that I know that interests you a lot, and you're on the show, and you're the guest, and so we're going to do all that we can to accommodate you. So,
what about me?
Mr. President, of course.
I'm not laughing.
Please, tell me a bit about natural gas and why you're so excited about the kind of discoveries that are now we're seeing happening in, the North Dakota, which is going to be the next Saudi Arabia, I hear.
I hope so. This is a great thing that drew me to Governor Huntsman. Governor Huntsman is a strong supporter of natural gas development.
Somewhere at least.
Yeah, absolutely. But it highlights just how nonsensical the left's approach to energy is, or the lack thereof. And it also highlights President Obama's utter failure on energy. His rejection of the Keystone Pipeline and his capitulating to the rabid environmentalist sect of his base proved that the president is not serious about solving the problems that are facing our country. We've been talking about
But it
energy.
also proves that he's pretty serious about climate change.
I think it proves that he's very serious about winning re-election with an increasingly small base.
Well, thank God we're not facing the largest crisis the world's ever seen with our climate. Because if we were, then it would make sense. But we're clearly not. So it makes sense he failed the Keystone.
I think Mr. President here makes a very good point. To blame him for the Keystone, you blame Democrats and liberals for not acting responsibly. I would say that is a very responsible thing to do. It was gonna environmentally damage.
I think Armageddon would have occurred had President Obama past the Keystone Pipeline.
Proudly.
Right, great point. I'm sorry. What I mean to say is this: we've been talking about energy independence for 40 years
since Jimmy Carter.
Since Jimmy Carter, another one-term.
Please
president.
don't say that name.
But what do we have? The environmentalist lobby will not let us have nuclear power because of some ridiculous concert that a bunch of musicians held, the No Nukes concert,
yeah.
which was headlined actually by a guy that I interacted with politically, former Congressman John Hall. So no nukes. We can't use oil. We can't use natural gas because of a fraudulent film that showed, water coming out of a faucet being lit on fire or something.
Yeah, that freaking stuff is scary. That's scary.
It's pretty scary. So what do? No offshore drilling, no drilling in Anwar. What is his solution? His solution is windmills, which Teddy Kennedy would not allow on his beautiful summer property.
Have you ever read Don Quixote? Windmills? Come on. This is stupid. But solar, all right?
Where Michael and I, where the two of us diverge is that I did not approve of the Keystone Pipeline, and I support Obama's refusal to accept it. But I do think.
So do you not hope for American energy independence?
I do, and
how are we going to achieve that? Are we going to achieve that with windmills and algae?
I
the
think
president, even the president won't use the algae anymore.
I agree that I think some of these things are dreams that will just never become a reality, right? You're not going to become 100% solar dependent, right? You're not going to have solar providing 99%, 100% of your needs.
So what do we do in the meantime? When gas prices are shooting through the roof, when the economy is in utter despair.
I'm a fan with you on natural gas. I like it. As long
I do too, especially after I ate beans. Excuse me. Did I say that?
but that's different than the Keystone, because with natural gas, right, it's not so much, and you can talk more about this, you'll have to come back on the show, actually.
I can't wait.
Yeah, because we're running out of time so quickly here. I told you, didn't I tell you 30 minutes goes by so quickly?
It flies by. With Joseph Goodman and with the president, time flies by.
That should be the new motto.
It's kind of like my slogan. First term, just flew by.
The truth is, we gotta go. And as much as I would like to continue talking about natural gas, it will have to wait till next week. So, ladies and gentlemen out there, before we do go, I do have to say thank you so much to Byron Edwards, another one of those local fans out there. Byron, thanks so much for tuning in. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Political Pulse. We're tuning out. This is Mr. President here, George Bush.
Thank you. God bless you. It's been a pleasure, Joseph.
Not at all. And Michael, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Joseph.
Everybody, have a good Monday, and we'll see you next week.